evening, everyone, and welcome to episode 39 of the Retrospectives podcast. My name is Patrick Arthur, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, James Turlings. James, aren't you glad that we've moved past episode 38, Lunar Silver Star Story, the JRPG, onto something that is not a JRPG? Because I know that I've come into this fortnight feeling like a new man now that I've put that episode behind us.
I think our roles are going to be reversed this episode, Patrick. I don't know what you've done to me, or why you've done this to me, but I guess we'll find that out.
It's funny because without going too deep into spoilers, it's not that I think that this week's game is brilliant or anything. It's just it's not a JRPG. And at the moment, after I went through, that elevates it far beyond how I'd normally regard this game. This fortnight, we are covering Hitman Codename 47, which is the very first entry in the Hitman franchise. It's a third-person action stealth game that was first released for Windows in the year 2000 by IO Interactive. Hitman nowadays is a massive franchise with the rebooted Hitman 2, which is a prequel that was released in 2018, being the most recent entry. And that has kind of like a live model. So there's been content constantly released, even as recently as this year, I believe. And the sequel to that is coming in 2021. So it's a franchise that has a lot of history behind it. And we've gone right back to the beginning. Before we introduce the game, just a little bit about who we are and what we do. We are the Retrospectives podcast. Each and every fortnight, James and I play through a classic game of the past to determine if it is a true classic that's worth playing today. We're not really interested in the historical context in which these games were released. We simply want to know if these games are true classics like the many classic movies and books that exist throughout history. As a result, we tend to judge them fairly harshly, but it does mean that when we do think it's worth playing, that it is a true classic and we think it's worth your time today. So we played Hitman. We just bought it on Steam. But before we get into the discussion, I think that it's necessary for us to discuss how we fixed it up, because playing it purely vanilla is not recommended. Someone on Reddit recommended a couple of links to me, which we'll include in the show notes if you'd like to check out Hitman. Substantively, the two major changes are a widescreen fix, and I also installed a what's it called, James? How far you can see?
Draw distance, Patrick? I think you should know this.
Draw distance, yeah. I kept wanting to say field of view because Hitman features a very interesting field of view, but a draw distance mod. There's also options if you want to install a cheat engine. I didn't go quite to these lengths. You can fix the atrocious field of view, but I didn't do that. So you were telling me earlier that you didn't actually install the draw distance mod. Was there any reason for that, James?
Sheer laziness mostly, and I also a bit more importantly kind of wanted to have both opinions on the show this week. So as somebody who did not install the draw distance fix, I would highly recommend you avoid my idiocy and install that fucking mod. It fixes up the game a massive amount in my opinion. I think the level of draw distance in this game is shockingly low, even for something that came out in the year 2000.
You basically get shot out of your view, or right at the very edge where you can just see a vague blur, which is basically unacceptable. It's super awkward. I also wanted to note that even though I was able to get a widescreen resolution working, the UI elements weren't scaled up because I went for the simpler fix. I think there is also a specific fix that fixes that up, but I, once again, like James, was lazy and settled on the first widescreen fix I could find. Apart from that, I experienced a couple of crashes, but other than that, it worked pretty well. I had 2 crashes in my 10 to 15 hour playtime.
I had 2 as well.
Yeah, generally speaking, the game is fairly stable. Unfortunately, when you're talking about games of this age, expecting it to not crash once is is insanity. So, two crashes for a game released in 2000 is pretty damn good. So, James, unless there's anything else, would you like to jump right into it?
Yeah, let's do that. Did you want to give us a brief overview over the general gameplay and story of Hitman?
Yeah, of course. So the story opens up with you restrained on a bed, and you seem to be wearing medical clothes. You wake up, and a mysterious doctor starts speaking to you on a radio or a walkie-talkie, and he guides you through what is the tutorial, but what's stylized as your training. Like he's your mentor, and he's putting you through the steps. Um, you seem to be in some hospital as you emerge from the end. You murder a doctor or, a nurse and escape the hospital. And then a year later, you're somehow an assassin for a group called the International Contract Agency, which just seems to be an agency that, hires hitmen, and those hitmen go and murder people for, a lot of dosh. You continue to murder people, and as you go on missions, the missions start to appear linked, start to appear related to one another, and the plot essentially thickens. And that story is delivered to you through little bits of text and the occasional cutscene. The gameplay of Hitman is a combination of stealth and action. It's similar to the Thief Undercover mission, where initially you're not going to be in dangerous environments because you're just a civilian walking around. And you're tasked with eventually killing someone in the mission most of the time. There's a couple of missions that don't have you assassinating people. So you kind of walk around the environment, identify the, unsafe zones that you can't get into, try and figure out ways to get in there, often by stealing people's identities, sneaking around, murdering people, gaining information to eventually safely assassinate whoever you're tasked with assassinating before escaping the environment.
Yeah. Um, I think the most interesting point for us to kind of kick off the discussion for this is kind of the level progression, I suppose, because I think compared to a lot of the later Hitman games, which are, fairly sandboxy and allow you to approach your assassination targets in a variety of different ways, Hitman 1 is a mostly linear puzzle game in a sense, where the solution to every mission is basically going to be the same for almost everyone who plays the game. And, if you were to go into a mission with perfect knowledge of the game, it would only take you about 5 to 10 minutes to finish, a level in total. Whereas actually how it usually plays out is kind of in what I came to think of as in these 3 phases, which was kind of like you spend, the first 5 to 10 minutes of a mission kind of like walking around and, figuring out where things are and what you can interact with throughout the game world. And, the second phase is then figuring out how to use this information in order to, put it together in the right order to solve the assassination puzzle. And then, once you've figured out the puzzle, you kind of move on to this third phase, which is execution. Something that really makes Hitman different from a lot of the later titles is that it has absolutely no checkpointing throughout the game. So if you do make a mistake, you have to begin the mission from the very beginning. So there's a lot of trial and error involved in trying to kind of solve these puzzles. Patrick, how did you feel about this?
So the first point I want to identify before we start talking about quick saving is that I think that there is a lot of difference in the quality and depth of certain levels compared to others.
Yeah.
Like I think that there are 2 levels in particular that stand out: the Lee Hong assassination and the hotel level,
Yeah.
which are really good examples of the gameplay you're describing. But there are a lot of levels in here which feel like they lack substance, either
Yeah.
because you end up just killing a lot of people to get through, or they're just incredibly short and they revolve around a single gimmick that you'd think would just be incorporated into one of the other levels. So I just want to start off by saying I want to talk about Hitman, I guess, at its best, at its most expansive with this discussion, because I have a lot of criticisms of many of the levels in this game. So, is it okay if we, I guess, zoom in on those 2 levels in particular to discuss that as a framework, even though they're not representative of the whole game?
Yeah, sure. I also agree with you, and that I think the quality of the levels in this game is highly varied, from pretty good to downright atrocious. And these 2 that you've highlighted were also my favorite in the game by far. So let's do the hotel level. I think that's probably the best level in the game.
So it starts off with you at the entrance of the hotel with a couple of guards, metal detectors, and I was really weirded out by this because you can select your loadout at the start of every mission, which we'll
Yes.
get into later. But if you select any guns at the start, then you can't actually get into the hotel without triggering the guards,
Yeah.
unless there's something I'm missing because there's no back.
No.
There's
That's
even
entirely intended, definitely.
there's a back entrance of the hotel and it doesn't let you walk on the street to go through the kitchens or anything. I tried to do
Basically, you can only
thing,
take in the Garrett wire, which
yeah,
is
because
just a
it's
piece
not
of
metal.
string. Yeah, you can take that in with you.
I tried a couple of gimmicky things like dropping my guns on the ground and then picking them up from the other side, and it worked, but it alerted the guards every time, which kind of sucked. I thought I was being clever, but yeah, I mean, all of a sudden it's kind of odd. And like you said, your objective is to kill a person and take a bomb that that person is planning to use to blow up the UN or
Yeah,
something.
so your objective in the hotel mission is essentially there is, a weapons dealer, who's staying at the hotel and he has access to a bomb and you need to both take him out and also get the bomb out of the hotel safely without being seen. So you kind of start off outside the hotel with nothing other than this little wire in your pocket, and you go into the hotel and you start to look around. It's a 3-story building with many rooms inside it, and you do spend the first 10 to 15 minutes of your playthrough of this level just looking around and trying to piece together what you have available to you. There are metal detectors throughout the complex. However, if you're sly enough, and you should be, you'll be able to figure out a number of paths throughout the whole building that allow you to bypass these. So if you're able to acquire a weapon, then you're rewarded by being able to carry it without being found. This is probably my favorite level in the game, just because it kind of has this level of detail in it that the others don't. For example, throughout the level, there are these kind of bus boys who are going around and putting fresh towels in each room. And in order to do this, they've got this little master key on them that they use to open each door. And you can definitely, just wait outside a few rooms for a bus boy to come and change the towels. And he's a naive young lad, and he leaves the key. He leaves the key in the door, which you can just happily take with you. And there's all sorts of little stuff like this throughout the hotel level, which really makes it kind of stand out for me compared to the rest.
It's even got the nice feature of there are do not disturb signs. So you
Yeah.
can have one room as your murder room, which is what I did, where I had about, 3 or 4 bodies stashed away with a do not disturb sign outside. What I quite liked about this mission was that there was a logical and easily identifiable progression
Yes.
to the mission. It was very clear from the clues what you actually had to do at any one given point. Once you've killed the terrorist, he has a card on him for the dentist. So naturally, you go to the dentist and you find the bomb, which is behind it's locked in an X-ray machine. But the dentist in question isn't there. So you speak to the secretary, and she tells you where the dentist is. And it feels very like you're not like we say. There's a degree of trial and error, and that a little bit of that is okay, exploring, investigating, and trying. But you could theoretically, if you're careful enough, get through this mission on your first try if you're patient and were able
Yes.
to execute each step correctly without getting super lost or confused, as long as you were paying attention.
Yep.
It reminded me of Thief that we played, where Thief most of the time was able to give you these contextual clues to guide you in certain directions, even to fairly hidden treasures. And I think that this mission did a really good job of pushing you along the right path without it feeling too narrow.
Yeah, my biggest criticism of this game is kind of, I think that when Hitman is at its most fun is the beginning of each level, when you're trying to figure out what you have available to you, but what you can use it for, and how basically when you're trying to put the puzzle pieces together and find the puzzle pieces. Once you've got the puzzle and you've assembled it in your mind, the game then kind of asks you to, you've formulated this perfect plan from start to finish, which will let you assassinate your target and then get out of there quick without being seen. And then the game kind of demands that you execute this plan perfectly. And if you fuck it up, you're doing the whole thing again from the start until you get it right.
Yeah.
And I found that many times through the game, I figured out this perfect plan within, the first 10 minutes of getting to a level, and then, beat the game like 40 minutes later after being, really unable to actually follow through on doing my task. This is kind of exacerbated by the fact that this is a slow, methodical stealth game. So when you kind of, you're forced to replay these sections that, you're taking out 15 different patrolling guards very slowly and methodically. And if you have to do that like dozens and dozens of times before you can get to the bit that you're actually struggling with, it becomes very tedious and repetitive very quickly, from my experience. Did you find that happen to you as well?
I completely agree. So you and I, particularly when we were playing Thief, but it's an issue that's come up a lot on the show over many episodes, is this problem we identified with quick saving. That these stealth games with quick saving, you're really incentivized to quick save constantly, to save scum your way through these missions. The alternative presented here that has no quick saving or mid mission saving at all is far, far worse because executing is so clunky and unreliable. The other problem is that when you do alert a lot of people in Hitman, it's not like in Metal Gear Solid 5, if you fuck up and you alert a base, the gameplay of being like, oh shit, I've alerted the base and being forced to fight your way out in a dynamic way is really entertaining and engaging
Yeah.
and a viable
Yeah.
way to get through. In Hitman, if you fuck up, it's either impossible or it's just incredibly unenjoyable and clunky and not fun.
Can we go over this clunkiness, for example? Because
Yes.
this game is probably the jankiest game we've played on the show, right? In
We've
particular,
played a lot of
I
jank,
think
but it's definitely
we've played a
janky.
lot of jank, but it's definitely up there, yeah. In particular, the guns I found to be super unreliable. Like, so many times I failed a mission because I was standing perfectly still and had a gun's crosshair aimed up on a head like a meter away, and it just shot in a completely different direction. It felt
Yeah.
almost random where guns would shoot sometimes, and it really takes the execution out of the player's control to a degree, and I really hate that.
So the way the shooting works is that guns have random spread, but there's no recoil. Like there's zero recoil on any gun. You just kind of hold down the trigger and the bullets will go, in a circle around the target with some actually going towards the head.
Yeah.
As I was playing this game, all I could think was, how is this game's third person shooting so shit
It's so
when
bad.
Max Payne, which was a third person shooter that came out a year later, is so much better. Like I'm not
Yeah.
normally into third person shooters, and Max Payne compared to modern takes on it like Uncharted or whatever is obviously a lot more primitive. But when you play Max Payne and you're shooting guns, the sound effects and the feel of the guns just feels good. Like it's an enjoyable, fun shooting experience. Anytime you use a gun in this game, it feels like you're being punished because it's so
Yeah,
unsatisfying and
it's
crap.
so bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it feels like you're playing Counter-Strike and you've been holding the shoot button down for like 3 seconds, but your level of accuracy is that all the time. I don't like it. I basically tried to avoid using guns whenever possible because of that, and maybe that's intentional. Maybe the game wants to encourage you using the knife and the Garrett wire as much as you can. It is a stealth game, but it was really
But
frustrating. I found that a lot of my fuck ups were because of this.
it's also worth noting that even using the knife and the garrote is clunky. Compared to something like Thief's blackjacking someone in the back, or even, other stealth games, choking someone out from behind or whatever, you kind of have to be the right distance from them and walking at them and aiming at head height. I think I never quite figured it out. But it was just awful. There were so many times I'd walk up to someone and instead of grabbing them and slitting their throat, I'd kind of start stabbing at their back which would alert them and they'd alert other guys. I'd be like, well, guess I'm starting this mission again.
I didn't have the problem with the knife that you did. Granted, I did spend like 5 to 10 minutes trying to get it to work on the first level, but once I'd, played with it for a bit, I was able to use it very consistently after. I actually think the knife animation for stabbing people in the back, or slitting their throats rather, is very fluid and really snappy, and I actually have no idea why the Garrett wire even exists, because its animation is like 10 times as long and it even costs more to take on a mission.
Let's talk a little bit about the intermission thing where you select your inventory. Why is there a price on anything? I don't know. I could pretty much afford every single item if I wanted to on every single mission. I don't know if you had any money troubles.
Yeah, you get given money at the start and end of every mission as a reward, and if you do a mission badly or like you kill too many civilians, it docks your paycheck pretty heftily, but I was swimming with cash. Like, I had hundreds of thousands of dollars, and guns cost like $250 or something. When you restart the game, when you restart a level, it takes money off you, so you just keep losing money. But I restarted every level dozens and dozens of times and still had buckets of cash to spare. I really like the idea of reading a bunch of intel and then selecting the right tools for the job before you go into the mission. And that's kind of what this game is trying to have you do, because it does present you, the information about your target, the map of the level, and some little, random details that are supposed to influence your weapon choices, but it really never lives up to its potential here. And I always just kind of took a silenced weapon.
Yeah.
And, if there was a knife and nothing else really, I always found weapons in the level. And I was mostly using the knife to take people out anyway, so I found this aspect of the game really disappointing.
It's just completely unnecessary. Like you said, silence pistol, silence SMG when it's available. Kevlar a knife in your set. All the other guns are unnecessary, except on the jungle missions where I grabbed a machine gun. Before we get into that half of the game, I just wanted to highlight, I guess, the thing that makes Hitman enjoyable for me. In addition to the puzzle-like aspect of it, I think the idea of a stealth game where you're hiding in plain sight is a really enjoyable change of pace to something like Dishonored or Thief. There was that one mission in Thief Undercover where you were, dressed up as a member of the Order of...
Yeah, and it was one of our favorite missions overall, right?
It was a really nice take, and it's kind of... It is cool being able to just walk around in, if you make a wrong move, they'll identify you, but otherwise walk around enemy strongholds in plain sight and no one's able to identify you. So I did enjoy that. And
that's because of the clothing mechanic, right?
Yeah,
it's one of the things you can do is take people out, and then you can steal their clothes, and you can take all sorts of costumes from, a chef's hat to, the classic red and black suit, all sorts of kind of costumes. And it makes sense, given the context. If you're trying to get into a military compound, you take out one of the guards patrolling outside and you steal his clothes, hide the body somewhere safe, and then, you're good to go. Actually, can we talk about how shit hiding bodies is in this game? It is fucking dreadful.
It really is. You kind of it's like ragdoll physics 101. So you kind of attach your hand to that body and very, very slowly move them along. It doesn't have the features like hiding them in dumpsters at all. So you
in the first level, there are dumpsters everywhere. Yeah, and one of the things I was trying to do was grab a body, and I was like, I can't figure out how to put it in the dumpster.
Yeah.
Until I realized that it didn't have that feature. What it actually has is these holes in the ground that you're supposed to drag the body into. Yeah. And so, in a game, you'd pick up the body and you throw it down the hole. Easy peasy. Not in Hitman. In Hitman, you ragdoll the body towards the hole, and then you awkwardly jiggle your character back and forth Yeah, and then you let go and it doesn't fall down the hole. It gets stuck on the rim and you've got to pick it up again and move it. And then, oh, it's awful. It takes like 40 seconds to jiggle this stupid body into a hole. And if you don't do it properly, passers-by are going to see his foot that is miraculously sticking out of the, the shitty little sewer grate. So
yeah, there's no context sensitive button. It's stupid. And Hitman is filled to the brim with moments like this where things don't quite gel smoothly. Like the clunkiness applies to everything. There was a moment, and this is more of a walkthrough moment, where I couldn't understand why I couldn't get into the into like the area where the prostitutes were in the Li Hong mission, because basically you awkwardly walk up to people and say, "Hey, I'm looking to get some action." In a similar way to that, and everyone will say, "Speak to the bartender." And so you speak to the bartender. He's like, "Yeah, check out the second floor." I'm like, "I can't get in there. What is going on?" Turns out you need to be in your original uniform in order to get the VIP pass. And the game does nothing to indicate to you that you need to be in your original uniform. So I spent 30 minutes playing until I looked up a walkthrough, and it's just a stupid little thing that it's the sort of thing that play testing would pick up, I think. But yeah, the game feels like it's missing all of these links, and it keeps getting in your way.
There's also this issue of narrative dissonance that I kept running into over and over in the game, where like the game's mechanics and what it would allow me to interact with kind of spoiled the puzzle in a number of ways. So if we go back to the hotel level that we used as an example before, Patrick's example had him walk into the building, assassinate the guy, find the letter that directed you to the dentist's office, and then find the bomb in the dentist's office. What I did was I went into the hotel, and then instead of going upstairs to the guest rooms, I went downstairs to the baths. And in the bath, there is a sauna where a suspiciously fat man is sitting, and you go in there and you talk to him, and he says, "Oh, I've got a weak heart. I don't know if I can take this, this warm sauna for much longer." And immediately you can go outside and interact with this crank, which, cranks up the temperature and causes him to have a heart attack. So that's the first thing I did. I had no idea why I was giving this fat guy a heart attack. All I know is that he dropped a key to an x-ray room. I don't know why that was relevant. But yeah, so I got into the x-ray room and was like, oh, the bomb's here. Cool. It just completely broke the flow of the level. I could interact with these things, and even though I had no, narrative reason to be doing that, and I found that happened all the fucking time, right?
Yeah, it's kind of stupid. There's also when you rescue one of the prostitutes in probably the worst rescue operation I've seen.
Oh my god.
So you walk into this room and you say, "Hey, what's going on around here?" And she says, "I'm not like one of the other prostitutes. I want to live a normal life." And you're like, "Well, I'm trying to rob this guy. How about you tell me?" And she's like, "Well, what about you rescue me? And then I'll tell you what the safe code is." Just a completely bizarre conversation. And then rescuing her consists of walking behind her as she escapes by herself.
Yeah, you don't do anything.
You don't even clear the way of guards. She literally could have done this anytime.
Done this herself anytime she wanted.
And she's like, "Thank you so much." I'm like, what is this game that I'm playing? Yeah.
And then she kisses you and your character has a very disturbed reaction.
Yeah, it's quite funny. So here's the thing. These are the good missions. What we're describing, all of our criticisms, these clunky, janky pieces of garbage, which have their highlights, are the best parts of Hitman. But
these are the best parts of Hitman.
Before we get into the bad parts, which I'm going to go into for quite some time, what about we have a music break, James?
Yeah, sure. So actually, we're going to be criticizing this game a lot. I feel based on your tone. Obviously, we don't talk to each other about this game beforehand, but I can't imagine that you're going to be giving this one a free pass.
Mm.
But actually, I thought the music in this game was pretty decent. It was really atmospheric and fit every level pretty well. I think they did a good job.
Yeah, so the track I chose is one of the first tracks in the game. It's the Hong Kong themes. This one is mainly synth music, and it's got some Oriental percussion. It's well done. We'll talk about it in a bit more detail, but I think this one did a really good job suiting the atmosphere. So this one is Hong Kong themes.
That was the Hong Kong theme, and as you could tell, it's pretty atmospheric, pretty it's dark and brooding, like much of the
Mhm.
soundtrack in Hitman, which really sets the tone for these low undercover missions that you're going on. Did you enjoy it overall, Patrick?
I did. So the main thing I want to hone in the music is, as you said, it's dark and brooding, which helps suit the atmosphere. But I wanted to say that I think it strikes the right balance between purely atmospheric music like we saw in Thief and something more orchestral. So basically in a game like Thief, when you're constantly sneaking around and you need to be listening to audio cues of patrolling footsteps and everything, you don't want loud music in the background. You just want something very subtle to help, underpin the tension. If you're playing an action game like Max Payne or even one of the Sims we've done where you're getting in dogfights all the time, you want something a bit more energetic that's pumping you up as you're destroying enemy ships or killing enemy soldiers. Hitman's music hits the right balance in that it's atmospheric, but it still has melodies and things like that. They're not traditional pieces of music, but they're doing it a little bit, which is perfect because you're not in action scenes, but nor are you sneaking around undetected. It's right in the middle. You're walking around hostile territories undercover with no one knowing your identity. So I think that the music suits the game perfectly. It hits exactly the right tone that it should.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think a lot of the tracks, Hong Kong and the jungle theme in particular, have these big sweeping orchestral moments in the middle of them between the, dark and foreboding atmospheric tone that they've got going on throughout the rest of them. The one criticism I do have is that oftentimes the songs end kind of abruptly.
Yes.
And it's very obvious when the loops begin, like it'll like fade out sharply and there'll be no music for a couple seconds and then it'll come roaring back in, out of nowhere. It's very abrupt, very jarring, and it broke my immersion a lot of times throughout the game, especially when you're repeating missions
Yes.
so often. As good as the soundtrack is, I did get a little sick of it, an hour into the same level or so. So, it's not really the fault of the OST for that, more on the game itself. But, overall, I think they did a pretty good job.
Yeah, I think both of your criticisms are completely fair. The way you always know when the music loop is restarting, and when you've restarted a mission for the 12th time in a row, you're like, all right, here we go again. It's a sort of soundtrack that I could actually listen from start to finish. I think independently of the game. game, which I haven't said about an endless number of tracks. But yeah, I was very glad to hear the next track when I finally moved on to the next set of missions. Yeah, so that's the music. It's pretty damn good. Do recommend it. Do you want to talk about some of the garbage missions, James?
Let's do that. Which one did you want to start with, Patrick? So I kind of want to point out that this game, from what I am aware of, the development of Hitman actually took a big drastic turn in the middle of its development. So apparently, Hitman 1 was going to be a much more actiony focused game until one of the people from Eidos, who worked on Thief, decided that was brought into the project and thought that the game would be better off being more slow and methodical. And because of this influence, you see very early on that the game goes from having these really small, focused missions to having these like large and sweeping, sprawling ones like the ones we mentioned before. How did you feel about the differences between the really small and really large levels, Pat? Because I noticed immediately when it made this transition, it was very jarring.
Yeah, well, at first, I thought it was just the game ramping up as a tutorial because the first couple of missions are very short. And I'm like, well, that's kind of okay. It wants to introduce these concepts in a simpler fashion before you get, the Li Hong assassination. And I'm like, so this is what all the missions are going to be like from now on. How
Yeah.
wrong I was.
Yeah.
So I don't mind the first couple of missions. One has like a Godfather reference where you can stash a gun in the bathroom to pick up later. So I saw what they were going for with that. But after that, it's a dramatic dip in quality, and I think the most notable one of these is the jungle missions, which are
Oh my
just
fucking god, they are
complete
so
garbage
bad.
for multiple reasons. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the jungle missions, I want to just talk about the first two and then talk about the third one separately.
Yeah.
There, you basically run around the jungle with an M60, killing people, unless you put on a uniform, in which case you can run around, not killing people. Except you need to kill people to rescue a guy at some point. There's basically no stealth elements at all
At all?
to
Yeah.
those missions, and you're
And they're
running.
fucking huge.
Yeah, they
These missions are gigantic. The area is like 4 times bigger than any other mission in the game, and you spend the entire missions just running between checkpoints essentially. And like, I kid you not, running from a couple of just running on forward with the sprint button held, it takes a couple of minutes. You're just doing nothing other than waiting for yourself to, finish running in a straight line. This was particularly bad for me, who didn't install the draw distance mod, because the draw distance is purposefully reduced in this level too, and you could see like 5 meters in front of you, and I was basically bringing up the map every few seconds to make sure I was going in the right direction. And even then, you'd run for like 20 seconds and bring up the map, and you'd barely moved across the damn thing. It just so much wasted time, and if you failed it, you had to do that all again. You can't skip bits. You have to go to each checkpoint in order. It is fucking boring.
It's identical looking jungle, just surrounded in fog.
Yeah.
Like 90% of the mission. It's so weird that you've gone from like this, very storybooky sort of style assassination missions, which have you, fulfilling a specific set of tasks to kill the target in a particular way, to running around a jungle with an M60 shooting at guards. It's such a bizarre transition. It's not playing to the game's strengths at all. It's not fun. The game would be better if those missions weren't there. The
I
second
agree.
mission in particular is weird for how short it is.
It's like a minute long.
Yeah, you get a pig, you put it on a idol for a jaguar to eat, and then you go and then you run past the jaguar. Mission over. Like that counts as an entire mission. And I'm
Yeah, it's like
scratching
40
my
seconds
head.
if you do it as
Yeah.
fast as possible.
Yeah, in a way, although this game supposedly has 13 missions, it really has half that, and you can just combine a lot of these missions together. And even when you combine them together, they're often nowhere near as long as the bigger ones. It's weird. I do want to hone in on the third of those jungle missions
Oh my,
though, because I
yeah.
think that was the worst and the most painful.
It is the most time-wasting mission. I don't understand, right? So you're tasked with infiltrating this drug smuggler's, kind of military complex. It's this big fortification surrounded by fencing. And the game, for some fucking reason, spawns you on the side of the fencing with no entrance, and then forces you to run for like 2 to 3 minutes in a circle in order to get to that entrance every single time
Yep.
you restart the mission. I don't fucking understand. This is absolutely atrocious. Who the
Yep.
fuck decided to waste the player's time like this? Just spawn me in front of the fucking entrance so I can get on with my life, I spent half my time in this mission just running around that fucking chain link fence, It was just mind-numbingly boring.
See, the thing is, there's not even like an alternate entry because I was like, oh, okay, so there's the front gate, but I'll probably, if I look carefully, there'll probably be a place for me to sneak through.
Nope.
Nope, just the one entrance. I don't understand.
It's so bad.
And the thing is, I failed this mission a lot because basically what you need to do is you go to, it's basically a Scarface sort of situation where you've got a person snorting cocaine on the top level of their mansion. It's not really a mansion; it's more like, you know, a Queenslander house.
Yeah.
And there's guards all over the house, and you can kill most of the guards silently because it tends to be one guard per room. But at some point, you do need to shoot your gun at one of the guards, and that alerts every guard in all the towers around his house. And when you start shooting him, every single time you hit him with a bullet, he gives you a voice line.
It gives you a cutscene.
Yeah,
It's like a cutscene voice line.
It cuts to a cutscene where he's like, "You're shooting me with that piddly gun," and he has like 15 voice lines as you're trying to kill him, and reinforcements keep coming.
Then he has a really powerful gun. Like, he has a fucking minigun, right?
He has an M60. The minigun's a lot more deadly. But yeah, once you've done killing him, you start getting shot at from these guard towers that I assume you couldn't even see with your low draw distance.
Yeah, I could not.
And then you exit, you keep getting shot by more people. It's just like this endless thing, running gun battle.
I want to point out that after I finished the game, I looked up some walkthroughs on YouTube to see how other people completed the missions, because I was pretty sure the missions were linear, but I wanted to double check. The person that I watched do this mission, as soon as the guy gets off his desk, he sprints behind him and executes him with the knife in one hit, which doesn't alert anybody because he didn't have time to shoot.
That's quite funny. It's not the sort of thing that jumps to mind when there's the person, holding a gun.
He kind of knows you're there, but I did it though. I actually found a way to execute every guard in the mansion without getting seen, only to, ruin it all once I barged into his office. But I kind of agree. This is my least favorite mission in the game. I fucking hated it.
Yeah, it's just like this repetitive slogfest. Okay, so I want to go to what I think is the biggest problem with this game now. So I think that there's a problem with having some missions be this problem-solving exercise and other missions be murdering sprees. And the key problem is, how do you as a player tell the difference between the two? And the answer is you can't. So when the game presents you with a problem, like how do I get past this checkpoint, you never know if the answer is murder the guards with your guns or come up with a creative solution to get past them.
And it's up to you, right?
Well, I feel like murdering people and alerting others to your location is not a fun way to play this game. So my instinct is to come up with this creative solution, I need to find this uniform, or I haven't explored this level enough, or I need to do X, Y, and Z. The problem is there are missions that do and scenarios which don't have a creative solution. where you actually have to just kill the guards in front of you or kill the guards in a room in order to make any progress. So, because of that, because the game doesn't have any vocabulary to tell you that there's a clever solution or doesn't provide you with a clever solution every time, it can waste a lot of your time as you try and think for a solution that doesn't exist.
I disagree. I actually kind of liked how it was really up to, you to figure out what you had to do. I strongly enjoyed the puzzle aspects of this game, and then, everything after that, when it was come down to execution, I fucking hated. Like, it completely undermines and ruins this game for me, which, is like half kind of fun, and then the other half like fucking miserable. There was this mission, and I think, you're probably thinking about this one, where you're in Rotterdam in this harbour. And one of the things you have to do early is there is a gate with two guards standing out front of it who won't let you pass, no matter what you're wearing. And what I kind of figured out is, this is kind of what you were talking about, right? Because I couldn't figure out how to get past these guards until I just gave up and shot them both in the head, and then, hid their bodies in the water. I did watch a video, when I was watching those, walkthroughs on YouTube. If you actually stand behind the patrolling guards as they're going through the gate, you can actually go with them through the gate, which I wasn't smart enough to figure out. But there was another solution there.
Should you be smart enough to figure that out? I mean, when you think about it, it doesn't make any sense that you'd be walking with someone and the person you're walking with would just ignore you, or that the guards would say, "Oh, it's completely fine for you to go through."
Yeah, that's fair.
So the solution doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense. But what I was actually thinking of was the previous mission, where you have to basically do the deal, like give the person the briefcase full of money.
Yes.
Because I was forced, I don't know how you did it, but I was forced to kill everyone in that warehouse because they were shooting me on sight. Did they shoot you on sight?
Yeah, they did.
Okay. So what I thought was, when that happened to me, it's like, oh, I must not be wearing the right uniform, or there must be a way to do this without shooting anyone on sight. Because obviously the game wants me to do this deal posing as a member of this gang. It would be ludicrous for the game to expect me to kill the 10 people in this warehouse. There must be some way to keep my identity. But as far as I can tell, there isn't. And there's no way for me to know that, because the game is bipolar on whether it wants you to kill everyone or follow these very linear mission parameters.
I see what you're saying. I actually,
Yeah.
in this case, I do agree with you. I think that in particular was pretty hard to figure out, and it did waste my time a bit trying to figure out what, the solution was.
Yeah.
But there was no solution there. It was just I was supposed to shoot them all, but I had no idea I was supposed to do that. The game's at its best when, you're doing these undercover missions and you're trying to put these puzzle pieces together, and then everything past that garbage, honestly. So I think that the number one problem in this game is its lack of checkpoints, and just the sheer amount of fucking repetition that you go through in each of these levels. Like, 5 to 10 minutes to finish it on a successful run, and it takes you like, an hour, where like 90% of that time is just repeating stuff you've already done. I was trying to think about how to do this, and I just wish this game had like Prince of Persia style time rewind or something like that, so you could like experiment with the levels still without, because I was afraid to experiment half the time, right?
Yeah,
Like,
because you get punished so badly.
yeah, you get punished so hard for fucking up that when you're near the end of the level, you just are so cautious, and there is no room for creativity here, because if you try something that doesn't work out, you're just giving up like 15 minutes of your life to slowly take out every patrolling guard again for the like 50th time.
Honestly, quick saving would have solved a lot of my problems, even though we've gone into those problems before. I still would love to see a stealth game like this use a safe room sort of system like you see in Resident Evil or whatever. And I understand there would be challenges associated with that, but I think that a safe room system is the best, because you want it. The problem with checkpointing is that you want it to be able to dynamically unfold, and I don't think checkpointing plus dynamics is the best mix. But if there were specific places you could save in, it would be much better.
Yeah, I agree that, hard checkpoints aren't really an option here because you'd get locked into these, unwinnable scenarios. But, Prince of Persia style time rewind, that'd be the best. If you had, a slowly recharging meter or something. But, it doesn't have that, obviously, and because of that, it's worse. But the sheer repetition sucks.
I agree with you. The game's incredible. Once you know what to do, you just actually have to do it, and it sucks. I wanted to talk about the story a little bit. We've alluded to it briefly, so spoiler warning: we're going to be talking about the full story. It's honestly not a big deal. I don't think this is a this is a big story game.
I got a question for you, Patrick. Is it supposed to be a plot twist that you're a clone? Like, is that not incredibly obvious from, like, the second you see your character with the barcode on the back of his head? Like, I just don't understand. Is this game supposed to have mystery elements? Because everything that happened, I saw coming, like, hours before it happened.
I mean, I think that it's not really meant to be a deeply mysterious game, but it is meant to have that air of a conspiracy, if that makes sense. It's trying
Like, intrigue, right? It's
yeah,
trying to build some
it's
kind
meant
of...
to build intrigue, and I think that you've got your shadowy cabal of figures. The way the story unfolds is you've joined this international contract agency and you start murdering people. It becomes apparent that all these people are linked. Every time you kill someone, you can read a note on that body, and often it's communicating to another the people that you end up assassinating or you've already assassinated. And you eventually go back to the hospital that you escaped from at the start with one final mission to kill a doctor. And then, surprise, surprise, the guy who got you to kill everyone in the first place calls in multiple SWAT teams on you to take you out. But all you need to do is, take on a uniform to avoid it. The number one thing I didn't understand about the story is why does he send him to join the assassination agency instead of just getting him to kill all those people independently?
I have no idea. No idea.
So basically, he's like, all right, I'm going to let my super assassin out into the wild. I'm going to get him to join this top secret assassin agency. And then I'm going to pay that agency to hopefully use that hitman to kill the people I want to kill. And all I could think was like, why don't you just skip all that crap, that complicated stuff, and just get the person who you're in control of to kill the people you want to kill? Like, why is there this big, and maybe there's something I'm missing, but that made zero sense to me. The entire setup of the story made no sense.
More importantly, can we get to the plot point that is the most nonsensical thing I've heard in my entire life?
Yeah.
When I heard this dialogue line, I was like in tears laughing from how stupid it was. So I had never played a Hitman game before, but I knew Agent 47 was a clone, and I assumed that from his name, Agent 47 meant that he was the 47th clone. That's not the case, apparently. Apparently, he's called Agent 47 because the good doctor discovered the immense power of the 47th chromosome, which he inserted into this character. Apparently, giving somebody an extra chromosome, instead of giving them, Down syndrome like it does in the real world, gives them the ability to be an incredible assassin. Like,
Obviously.
I was in... Yeah, obviously.
Yeah,
obviously.
science games. Obviously, you don't understand it.
Yeah, this is just a very inclusive game, right? It's just so stupid. Like,
honestly, the way he speaks to regular human beings, you do wonder about his mental problems. It's like this very, very staggered,
very eccentric. Yeah. Well, so actually, let's talk about the voice acting quickly. For the most part, I think it's god awful.
It's really
But
bad.
the Doctor, I actually quite enjoyed listening to his dialogue for the most part. I just wish that he only talks to you in two of the missions, the tutorial and the final level, and he's got a lot of dialogue, and voice over through an intercom in both of them. But whenever you advance the level, he skips to the next voice line, so you end up cutting off half of them. It's really frustrating because I did quite, like listening to this deranged Doctor as opposed to everybody else who sounded stiff or really cheesy and unconvincing.
Or, racist because they were
Yeah,
doing
that
these
too.
awful accents. And it's like, sorry,
Are you
come
fucking
on.
kidding me? Yeah.
I mean, I've kind of been exposed to plenty of this with these old games. Like, the fake Chinese accents are the worst. Deus Ex actually does this almost worse than any voice acting. The Hong Kong accents in Deus Ex are fucking horrific. They weren't quite this bad, but they were close. They were pretty close. I want to talk about the final mission or the final, last two missions, which are kind of grouped up as
Sure.
a way to bookend the story discussion. Fucking weird missions. So
Yeah.
you go to this you're in a mental asylum basically. You go up the stairs to kill this final doctor, and then the your arch nemesis, the doctor who cloned you, calls up SWAT teams. Like, there are literally 15 troops that come with machine guns to kill you, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? But if you put on the doctor's clothes, there's literally nothing happens. And then you have to figure out what to do because the front door's locked. But now, instead of just leaving, there's ways to leave, but you're now on a mission of revenge or something. And it's not
Really clear.
it's not
Yeah.
really clear because your character never says anything to indicate that they want revenge. Like, you're just carrying out what the agency does. I guess the fact that someone called the SWAT teams on you, you're like, well, I'm gonna deal with this. And the way you go about this mission is bizarre. So you speak to there's two patients in the mental asylum, and they both want an object. And when you give them the object, a rubber duck and a book, they tell you the location of where you're meant to go next. But the weird thing is that those two patients are all over the place and they all have the exact same voice lines.
Yeah.
I don't know if you noticed that, James, but you'll run
Yeah.
into those two patients all over the hospital in various locked rooms, and they're all exactly the same as the
Found
other
that kind of
ones.
funny, but it was a
Yeah.
bit bizarre. In general, I thought the characters in this game were very bizarre, especially the main character who I just cannot figure out, right? I don't understand him at all. Sometimes he's quippy, sometimes he's this robotic character, sometimes
Mm.
he's following orders, other times he's rebelling. He just seems to do what he wants for the
It's
sake of the
random.
game. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's completely random.
As you enter each new area, he comes on, he starts speaking to, like, narrating. He's like, Hong Kong. I never thought much of Hong Kong, but I always liked their food. He's kind of giving that sort of, lone assassin sort of intro to these, fancy environments that he's going to, which is a very humanistic sort of way of talking about things. And then, like you said, he's just a complete stiff robot at other times. I think that the other thing is that, at least in my game, my version of 47 had no problem, casually murdering civilians in order
Yeah.
to get to his final assassination. So he's not really a super sympathetic character. Like, he's got no love interest or anything. He's literally killing people for money, and you never get any. He's a clone. There's no exploration of his identity or him trying to break out from this narrow path that he's on. He's an utterly uninteresting character. He's one of the
Yeah.
most boring characters I've had the displeasure to work with. Garrett in Thief is so charismatic and sarcastic. Like, that's a character. Agent 47, not at all.
But they didn't go the full way of making him a non-character, making him super robotic.
Yes.
It feels like they didn't know what they wanted to do with him, honestly. because I think he, as a character, has great potential for being interesting. And he just never is really. I don't think any of the characters are.
Yeah, he's not quite a self-insert like someone like Corvo in Dishonored, who has no voice lines, but you can really become Corvo or become Emily when you're playing the Dishonored games. And I never got that feeling playing these games. He's no Adam Jensen, he's no JC Denton, just a very disappointing character. And he should be interesting. Like he's an assassin, but
Basically, I just did not give two single shits about the plot of this game the
yeah.
entire time I was playing it. It didn't hook me in. Honestly, the tutorial was the most intriguing
I
part of the
agree.
entire plot.
Yeah.
When the tutorial started and ended, I was like, oh, this is actually going to be pretty cool. And then it plummeted downhill after that mission. So
it just gives you a year gap and you're an assassin now. It's like, yes, we want you to kill this person. It's like
yeah.
it's like, what is going on? I don't understand the link.
I've been unfair. The very first level actually has really good intrigue, which you then quickly forget about as the rest of the game comes on. So yeah, not the best here.
So James, are there any more gameplay things you want to touch on? Well, let's have another music break. What song did you choose for our show?
So I was torn between playing the jungle music or the main theme of the game, and eventually I decided that because nobody should be forced to experience the pain that was the jungle levels in this game, we'll give you the main theme instead. So here's the main theme for Hitman Codename 47. That was the main theme of Codename 47. It was pretty good. I liked it a lot. It plays every time you're selecting the weapons, and even though as we said, the selection of your loadout isn't particularly engaging, I did enjoy hearing the tune come in every single time between levels. So, Patrick, was there anything that you wanted to talk about before we jump into graphics?
Yeah, we'll touch on the controls in the field of view, because
yes,
I forgot to mention one of the fixes that we installed was a controls fix that basically rebinds the controls so that a human being can use them. I haven't had the displeasure of using the original controls, but apparently they're really bad. So there's a fix that we'll link to as well that just gives you a basic WASD control scheme. But even with the fix, the controls for this game are still weird. So one of the things, I'll go over a couple of things, but one of the things that really stood out to me when I first started was I couldn't figure out how to sprint. Because what I'd do is I'd hold down W to move forwards, and then I'd hold down Shift, and my character would keep walking. And then I'd do it again. I'd look it up online. I'm like, why the fuck isn't this working? So in order to sprint in this game, you have to just hold down Shift and your character will start sprinting forward. If you're holding down W when you start sprinting, it will refuse to sprint.
Yeah, it just goes back to its walking speed.
Yeah, and it's like, what is going on? You get so confused because holding down Shift to sprint is such an essential thing, but I eventually figured it out.
So there's the Steam sales on currently, and I got Titanfall 2 for like $10 online, and then I was playing it, and every time I'd start playing that game after doing a bit of Hitman, I was trying to sprint by just holding shift down and not holding forward, and being like, why the hell is my character not moving? Oh yeah.
The other control quirk that stood out was I couldn't figure out how to zoom in the sniper rifle. The very first mission, the way you carry out the assassination is with a sniper, and I'm like pressing Z on my keyboard, I'm pressing V, I'm trying to right click, and nothing's happening. So to zoom in your sniper rifle, you press left click, which for anyone who's ever played a video game is how you shoot your gun in any other game. And in any other game, that would shoot a bullet from your sniper rifle unscoped. But in this game, pressing the shoot button zooms in your sniper rifle, which then lets you shoot again to actually shoot the gun. So that was 5 to 10 minutes of my life.
Oh, is
wasted.
that what you're talking about? You're not talking about the alternate zoom levels, which you need to scroll the mouse wheel forward to?
I got those. It's just the act of literally, because, it's an assassination. You can't just shoot off your sniper rifle by mistake. So I was looking through the controls. There's no binding for it because it's on. So yeah, this game has a couple of silly control quirks, but as long as you install the fix, it's basically functional. Using
I didn't like when there was multiple items in your vicinity that you could interact with at once. So basically, the interact button on, I don't know if this was the case with just the fix we installed, but like for us, clicking middle mouse button was how to interact with objects. And then like if there was like 5 items on the ground at once, you had to right click to bring up a context menu and then scroll through it with the mouse wheel. For example, you'd scroll through knife, gun, and then clothes, and then like left click to put the clothes on. It was really clunky. Also, a thing that I noticed that was really annoying was often when you're holding a gun out in the open, you'll alert guards, because of course you will. And what this kind of incentivizes is using the scroll wheel to select an item, but not pressing the button to select it, just having it like almost pre-selected until you need it at that exact moment. Like I was doing all sorts of weird janky shit with the controls. Like there's a sneak mode.
Does that even do anything?
Yeah, it makes you sneakier. So for example, if you have a knife and you just walk behind somebody, they'll turn around and spot you. But if you're sneaking when you're behind them, they won't spin around. So what you do is you sprint up behind somebody, press control, like pre-align your selection cursor to the knife, then tap stealth, then tap execute, then like quickly scroll to holster weapon, press that, untap stealth mode. Like you never stealth around. Like, you only ever tap it and then use it when you're executing things. You never use stealth mode for anything else.
You don't use stealth mode for stealth, right? There's no real sneaking in this game. That's not a thing in Hitman. You're not sneaking around. You just use it for incredibly brief spurts to kill someone. And then you're like, well, now I'm running around in my stolen clothes. So I'm basically, no one's going to stop me doing anything.
Yeah, it's really jank. Not great.
I will say it was mostly functional, but there are a lot of annoying quirks. I do want to finally touch on field of view because it's fucking atrocious. Like, I don't know what it is, but you get this super zoomed in thing where it's not quite third person because you're so close to the back of Hitman's head that you can't see anything. It must be a field of view of 40 or something. It's probably more bearable if you're playing like on a controller on a TV, but even then, I think that you'd find this field of view atrocious. And the only way to fix it is with cheat engines. So be aware that that's pretty blacky and it'll take a while to get used to.
Honestly, I didn't notice it too much until
can't stand
like
it, man.
halfway through the game. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's pretty bad.
I set my field of view to like 105 in like every single game that I can. I can't stand narrow field of views. It drives me bonkers. I need the wide vision.
Can you clear something up for me? Was this a bug? Did you notice that whenever you dropped a gun, it didn't fall? Did that happen to you? Like
what? It would hover in the air for you?
Yeah.
No, that was a bug.
Right, because every single time I pressed P to drop my gun,
Yeah.
it just stayed where his hand was forever. Every single time I dropped an item, they just
Yeah, that's a
and
bug.
it wasn't just my character either. There was this bit where there was this guy with this sniper rifle standing on top of a tower, and I thought, if I shoot him, he'll drop his gun and then I can pick it up. But you shoot him, and then his body falls off the tower. And the gun is still like floating above the tower. It's like, are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah, that's just a bug. I could definitely drop things to the ground, no problem.
Right. That's weird. It happened to me every single time. Like, I never saw a gun have physics on it. I have no idea what that was.
They didn't have physics. It's more that when you drop them, they would be lying on the ground. They weren't. I mean, I know that sounds silly, but this is 2000. They had ragdoll physics, but they didn't have
the ragdoll physics are absurd. Like, you'll be in an elevator and your tie is like flying up in the air because like you're going downwards, and that's not how gravity works, guys. Did you know that one of the reasons that they decided to make this into a stealth game was because they thought that the slower, more methodical gameplay would better show off the graphics, which were, pretty intense for the time. Ragdoll was pretty crazy back in 2000. Yeah. How funny is that?
So basically, for those who haven't seen this game, it looks like dog shit. Like, and that's being generous to the dog shit. Like, once again, this game compares unfavorably to Max Payne. Like, we criticize Max Payne's blocky graphics, but I watched some videos of Max Payne again, and I'm like, oh my god, Max Payne's graphical style is so clean and aesthetically pleasant. Because Hitman has these like ugly stretch textures all over the place. Like, it's just every way you look at these stretch textures, the outside bits, like the jungle, like there's just these giant leaves that's stretching up these trees. It's just one giant stretch texture. The only positive thing I have to say about it, and this is the only thing, is that I think that in a macro architectural sense, I think a lot of the level design is sound. Like, there has been effort put into making these certain places feel like real places, like the hotel and the temple where you assassinate Lee Sing have all these different compartments, and there's kitchens and bathrooms, and I think that they fit together in a broad sense. But aesthetically, these places are ugly as sin.
Oh, it's so ugly. And I would like to draw special attention to the skyboxes, which are completely abysmal. Later, when you're in the docks of Rotterdam, you can see, like, it looks particularly bad when you're in a specifically outside area where you'll look into the skyline and you'll see like this cityscape that is like, I don't know, like 10 centimeters repeated over and over and over. It's like there'll be like 5 buildings and then the same 5 buildings and then the same 5 buildings, and it's extremely obvious that you're just in this big rectangular room with like a night sky texture on it and then some really poor smoke effects for clouds. It looks horrendous if you scrutinize it with any level of detail. I think that the ragdoll is really jarring and inappropriate. Like, it's actively bad when you're trying to drag bodies around. The lip syncing and the dialogue is atrocious as well, and just the general quality of the animations in the cutscenes is abysmal. Like,
it's worse than Freelancer, right? It's so much stiffer, and once again, we were extremely critical of that.
Yeah, this is one of the ugliest games we've played on the show, I think. I did not like the way this game looked.
There are weird things with the ragdolling with your character model as well, like the way you pick up objects. There was one hilarious moment where I was some enemies, I'd alerted enemies, and they were pushing through the doorway, and I was kind of halfway in the doorway, and my character's hands, because they were pushed by the doorway, were kind of pushing up in the air. So when I'd shoot my gun, like, I'd be trying to shoot straight and my gun would be shooting straight up in the air because the door had pushed the model of my hands up. And the same thing had happened to the enemy that was right next to me. So we were standing next to one another, shooting our guns in the air while we were trying to kill one another. Absolutely terrible.
It's so bad.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all I have.
That's it. That's it.
That's it from
That's
me.
it. Just sad and press. Okay, well, I think we're ready to move on to final impressions. Would you like to begin, James? Has Hitman stood the test of time? Is it worth playing today?
has Hitman stood the test of time? Hitman has some really good ideas. I really like that, this kind of direction where you're going through these levels and you're getting all the information and you're putting it together and you're solving a big puzzle. It's unfortunate that these sections are like 10% of the game time overall, and that, the other 90% of the time is doing boring, repetitive tasks that you've done like 16 times prior. This game is hard. It's way too hard. There's no checkpointing, and it just wastes your time so much. This game looks like dog shit. It sounds pretty good, actually. I was going to criticize that then and realized I was wrong. But Hitman has not stood the test of time, in my opinion, at all. I think this is probably one of the worst games that we've played so far, and it's really kind of disappointing because there are times where it does show this, potential of brilliance shining through the muck, as it were. But it ultimately does not live up to that potential, and for that I cannot recommend this game. In fact, it's a stay far, far away from me.
Hitman sucks. This was not a fun game to play or experience. I think of like the 13 good missions, 13 missions, there were like 2 good ones, and there were maybe 1 or 2 that were okay, and then the rest were complete trash with lots of terrible moments. I don't think the story is good. I think the gameplay is frustrating. Most damning of all, I don't think there is a single thing about this game that is better than what is offered by modern titles or even old titles. I think Thief provides a far more dynamic stealth experience. I think Dishonored provides a better dynamic assassination experience. I think that the modern Hitman games, and I haven't played a lot of Hitman 2, but I've watched, let's plays of people playing around with the systems, are really the realization of what this original game was trying to do, in that it fuses dynamic gameplay with storied assassinations, and you can pursue
Feels
them
like
as
a
much
tech
as you
demo,
want.
right?
It feels like less than a tech demo because it's not even fucking demonstrating anything except pain. The fact that when things go tits up, it's unenjoyable means that the save structure, which is the same as Metal Gear Solid 5, is an atrocity. Um, like you, James, I'm very disappointed. There are some good ideas here, and I didn't hate every single moment I had with it, but I did dislike most of the moments I had with it, and I cannot, in good conscience, recommend it or say it stood the test of time. I will be interested as we move forward to eventually do more Hitman games, because I'm
Yeah, I
sure
agree.
there's a transition point where these games actually get really good and I'll enjoy them. But this first one is not that game, and I'm very sad because of it.
I mean, even something that Hitman is supposed to do is have all these sort of like little hidden details that you can find and exploit. Like, this game doesn't even do that as well as something like Metal Gear Solid 1 on the original PlayStation.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you a lot this time, James. It's making me feel uncomfortable, but
It's making me uncomfortable
I
too.
think we have broadly speaking, the same consensus on this game.
After we played such a repetitive game last time, I was sure that you wouldn't inflict the same kind of misery on us again here, but alas, that's not the case.
Well, that makes a good segue to our wrapping up. Firstly, thank you so much to everyone for listening to our thoughts on Hitman. We are the Retrospectives podcast. You can find all of our content on our website, rspodcast.net. We've also got a Twitter and some other stuff. It's all linked there. Most importantly, we have a Discord server. A Discord server is where we have most of the interesting post discussions regarding this show, and also discussions about many modern games. And in fact, I selected Hitman on the recommendation of a friend who wanted to see it played. And then I made an impromptu call which game we should play. So you can blame our Discord community for it, James, not myself. But We'd love for you to tell us what you think of Hitman or any other thoughts on any of other episodes. So if you'd enjoyed it or you have anything to add, please drop by. There'll be a link to the Discord in the show notes and on our website. So, with the show wrapped up, it's time for us to discuss what we'll be playing next fortnight. Since I selected Hitman, it's on James to select the game that we're playing next. What are we going to play, James?
Well, I was actually approached by multiple different parties, all asking me to play the same title, and that title is Earthworm Jim, a game that I actually played many, many times myself previously. So I'm actually kind of keen to do it for the show and see, if because I've changed a lot since I played it last. I want to see if I'm got a much more critical eye towards this game in, a more nuanced sense. Have you ever played this game before, Pat?
Funnily enough, I have, but I've never finished it. I played it when I was very little. I remember, so my memories are vague. I remember launching a cow at the beginning, and I remember there was this thing where you're on a spaceship chasing someone, and I could never beat that mission, so I gave up and never played it again. So hopefully my skills as a gamer have developed to the point where I can overcome that challenge. But you never know.
I kind of hope that you haven't, honestly.
It might be another F-Zero GX situation where I'm too casual to beat it.
Well, I guess that's all for this time. We'll see you in a fortnight for Earthworm Jim.
We'll see you then.